Welcome to this edition of Decryptage. We are pleased to have with us Honorable Agho Olivier BAMENJU, Member of Parliament in the Cameroon National Assembly. He is also a member of the World Bank Climate Finance Steering Committee and so many other titles on his portfolio. Together, we will talk about issues of climate change in Africa and how the continent can speak with one voice on the global level to attend to this matter. Honorable Olivier BAMENJU, thank you and welcome to Africa 24 English. Tell us about the panel discussion in which you took part during the 2024 edition of the African Economic Conference.
We took time to look at some of those challenges that the policymakers face when uncertainties occur, and I was very pleased to share the Cameroonian experiences and to also share the experiences, the continental experiences from Africa, taking cognizance from the African Union experiences. We were looking at how uncertainties affect the economic situation of Africa, and we look at foreign direct investment in the face of uncertainties. We look at investment. We look at how a country can mobilize resources, local resource mobilization to meet up with local realities. And then I personally took up one key example, and that example was the uncertainty that occurred during the COVID-19, because no country was ready for COVID-19. So it was a clear example of uncertainty that touched on the African continent. But as you are aware, the challenge that Africa faced at this time, which I articulated during this conference, was that there are a lot of unequal playing grounds for the global north and the global south, because during this time, Africa faced three key challenges. Africa was prevented from producing its own vaccine. African traditional medicine was not recognized, even though it proved very efficient in the treatment of COVID-19. And lastly, 22 African countries went into debt distress, but rather for the international financial institution to cancel the debts and monitor or accompany these countries into redirecting the funds into local investment or national investment project, but they rather restructure the payment of these debts. So it kept these countries that were already into debt distress still struggling, and so it was a kind of a playing ground that was not level. And so we're looking at when a playing ground is not level and uncertainty or uncertainty strikes, what are the negative consequences? We see how uncertainties affect the African continent more than any other region in the world, because of the imbalances that are found in the international stage. We also look at the effect of climate change, and we saw that Africa does not emit up to let's say even 5% of the greenhouse gas emission, but Africa suffers the greatest negative effect of climate change. But at the same time, the commitment that was taken in France during the Paris Agreement, and even the commitment that was taken last year in France during the Global Financial Pact that was hosted by the President of France, President Macron, no country in the North is keeping its engagement on on climate finance. So Africa continues to suffer this imbalance in the domain of climate finance. And so we were condemning this attitude, this kind of attitude, and calling on the international community, calling on the international financial institutions that that they should make a living ground for everyone, because so that when uncertainties occur, Africa can be able to strive. Africa can be able to survive.
You are part of the World Bank Climate Finance Steering Committee, and climate finance is a very serious matter for Africa. Do you think Africa will once be heard in terms of its reclamation vis-a-vis the insufficient climate finance allocation?
Yes, it's going to be heard. A lot is being done. You know, ACNES, the African group of negotiators, expert support, is doing a lot of work on the behalf of Africa to negotiate a common position for Africa. But one thing we should go further to say here is building the capacity of Africans, particularly on the domain of carbon market. I come from a country that is a member of the Congo Basin Forest. Congo Basin Forest is the second largest forest in the world after the Amazon. And so if member countries of the Congo Basin Forest capacity on carbon market is not being well strengthened, even though we have the forest, even though we have the forest that plays as a carbon sink, and we do not know how to go about the carbon market issues, we will not benefit anything. And so we are also saying that that the international community should consider building the capacity of Africans in the domain of carbon market, in the domain of explaining some of those institutions that are there to finance in the domain of climate change. I want to use the opportunity to also say that there is another logic that is being played out there. Before now, the official development assistant, which is a kind of foreign aid that is directed from the developed country to the developing countries, some of the countries have been turning it now into climate finance. But it should be very clear that official development assistance is different from climate finance, because climate finance is a commitment that has been taken and was taken during the Paris Agreement. Climate finance is something that they have to take the commitment in responding to it, in doing in Africa. Meanwhile, the official development assistance is something completely different that they used to give to developing countries, even though we are not saying that they should giving us foreign aid, because it's a thing that makes Africans to live independency, which is not something that we really want to think about it. But we want to say that the two should not be mixed. The two should not be, they should not be confusion in handling the two, official development assistance and climate finance.
Many people say that Africans talk well before short on action. And even during the opening ceremony of the African Economic Conference, His Excellency, the President of Botswana, asked experts to come up with actionable solutions. For example, what action will you recommend your country to take as a result of the talks from the conference?
From this conference, I have an action plan back home, and that action plan is to make sure that the activities of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa on the ground in Africa are clear, that they should be accountable for what they present in conferences that they are doing in the African member countries. The same thing with UNDP and the same thing with the African Development Bank. Because I was talking to the executive director of the African Development Bank that we need to see how we can bring members of parliament in Africa together so that they can be able to speak the minds of the African people to them, to what they are doing. Because honestly speaking, most people in Africa, the local people, the local communities in Africa, they don't understand anything around projects that are being implemented from the international community. And that is where the president was talking that we should move, we should be able, in fact, the president actually said we should be brutal. We should move from just speaking to implementation. And this implementation means that what? It means that the people who are the beneficiaries of this project should be able to, should be part of the implementation process. Because when they are part of the implementation process, they own all those projects. I think that's where the problem is. And I want to also use this opportunity to talk about the African Continental Free Trade Area, which has to remain a dream because of this issue of signing and not implementing. And so I think that it's high time for Africans to unite, to come together and see and cause this African single market to be a reality. Because it will be the single market zone in the world, a single market that with the potential of reaching to 1.4 billion people. It is not anywhere in the world. When during my session, I took example of the European market. Last year, the European Union celebrated 30 years of single market. What is happening in Africa that we cannot? A simple thing that we can do, that we can bring Africa together. Some countries think that some are going to swallow some. It's not true. It's not true at all. I want to tell you that Cameroon and Nigeria are neighbors. Nigeria has a population of more than 200 million people. Cameroon is close to 30 million people. And Cameroon and Nigeria signed this partnership since the time of President Gowon. Till today, Cameroonians don't need a visa to go to Nigeria. Nigeria don't need a visa to come to Cameroon. You can go to Nigeria anytime and come back to Cameroon anytime. But Nigeria has never swallowed Cameroon. So the concept of African countries still using their borders as a means of generating resources for their country, it doesn't work. And so I'm using this opportunity to also call on the Secretariat of the African Continental Free Trade Area in Ghana to move faster with the GAP fund in order to fill all these spaces that some countries are still afraid of.
Honorable Olivier BAMENJU, thank you for answering Africa's 24 questions. And to our viewers, thank you for watching this program. Stay tuned to Africa 24 English for more programs.